Hey everybody, and welcome to Hell is for Children. This show is on every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 2100 hours Central European Time. My name is Geerte Franken, and this show is all about the topic of protective mothers and their children. So what's a protective mother? A protective mother tries to protect her child or children from their abusive father by many means necessary, which is an uphill battle in today's global corrupt family court system that thrives on paternal entitlement. And today's guest is Holly Bradley. Protective mother Holly Bradley lost custody of her breastfeeding baby to her abusive ex as a result of his false allegations of kidnapping and despite evidence of abuse. Welcome to Hell is for Children, Holly.
Hi, Garrett. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. When we did the intake for your show, I was really emotionally struck by your story because, you know, my daughter was taken when she was 10 years old, but I cannot even begin to imagine what it's like to have to hand over your breastfeeding baby to your ex. And I mean, it's just incredible. And there's only a few moms that I know that have gone through that. So, I'm really grateful that you're willing to share your story today on Hell's for Children, because it is so, so grave, you know, your situation. So share with us how you got to be in the situation that you're in today.
I left the abusive situation finally after getting brave enough. It takes a lot of courage to do. When my baby was 6 months old, went to a women's shelter, and I have a 13-year-old daughter as well that I took with me. Was about to file a restraining order, and my ex's father had called and talked me out of it so my ex wouldn't lose his job. We created a legal document stating that I could go back to my family in Oregon with the baby, and that I would just have to send him pictures and updates of how she was doing.
So at this point,
that would be our custody agreement.
So you were in California at this time, but you're originally from Oregon. Is that correct? And so the relationship that you had with your ex was already falling apart as you were pregnant. Can you talk about what led up to the separation?
It became very abusive when I was about 5-6 months along in my pregnancy, and had escalated. When she was born, it got a lot worse. It was really bad. I had started sharing with family members, my aunt, my best friend, my mom, what was going on. My aunt advised me to start taking pictures and sending them to her. It was like a prison camp. I got my phone checked every day. Everything I did was monitored. I wasn't allowed to go do things. I didn't have friends. It was very isolated. So once I started reaching out, she had advised me to take pictures and document things that were happening to me. So I did that, and I knew, eventually I knew I was going to get the courage to leave. I just didn't know how, and I've learned a lot of them do this where they threaten that they will take your children if you leave. So I was just completely stuck.
Now, when I
finally did go to the shelter,
just to back up for a second, what kind of abuse was taking place besides the coercive control?
There was a lot of physical abuse. There was sexual abuse. There was even, I was trapped in rooms. I wasn't allowed to go even get myself a coffee. I wasn't allowed to have any money. If I did something out of what I was supposed to do, I bought the baby a bathtub one time for $9 and got thrown into a cabinet for that, and with her in my arms. I was strangled. I was pushed down. I was punched. He dumped water on us a couple times when I tried to go in a different room. Came in with a huge vase of water, dumped it all over the baby and I when I was nursing her. When she was about 2 months old, he started ripping her off my breast when I was nursing her. That was one of my punishments. If I was doing something out of what I was supposed to be doing, that was one of the main punishments, as far as with her, that was abusive to her as well. We'd just be sitting there nursing, and I didn't want to talk about something. He'd just come up and rip her right off.
It's awful. So when she was about 6 months old, you decided to go to a women's shelter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so what happened?
I had been sending the pictures to my aunt. I thought, okay, I'm safe now. I had called the domestic violence hotline probably 20 times when I was there. Everybody I had talked to, my best friends and my mom and my aunt, had been saying, you need to leave. And you're scared. They keep telling you, I'm going to take the baby from you if you leave. I'll say you're a drug addict. I'll say you're this. I'll say, and I'll get the baby and you'll never see her again. When I knew I had the pictures and I had talked to people about getting a restraining order, talked to legal advocates, I had talked to an attorney at this point, and I thought I was fine. I would go get the restraining order. We would be safe. I could move away. That's when we created the document, because instead of getting the restraining order, I thought, okay, well, I can go. We'll be safe.
So this was
that I left. I was 100.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I want to just talk about this legal document that you created with your ex. Can you explain what it entailed?
It just said that I could move back to Oregon with my family and I would have physical custody of the baby, that we would have joint legal, but I would have physical custody, that I would be allowed to move back to my home, my hometown of Portland, Oregon, be with my family. The agreement even stated that all I had to do was send pictures and email updates on how she was doing, and that would be it. So I felt comfortable enough, I had a paralegal in town write that up for me. It was signed, it was notarized. I had talked to advocates and attorneys that said, yes, that's sufficient. Courts, a lot of them told me courts prefer when parents can work things out without having to litigate. So I thought, well, that's perfect. I can go. My best friend from Las Vegas, she came and picked us up. It's only about 3 hours from here, me and my daughters, and we went to her house to stay until I could make arrangements to get to Oregon. I left with nothing. I left with a laundry basket full of clothes, no money, so until I could make arrangements to get to Oregon, I was going to stay with her, and he sweet talked me into coming back, said he would go to counseling. I knew I still had the pictures. We had an agreement in writing that I would get to take my car with me and some money to get on my feet if I needed to leave again, if he became abusive again. So I felt okay with having this document. I was safe. If it started getting abusive again, I could leave. So I went back.
And what happened then?
For about the first month, it was pretty normal, pretty, what our life looked like on the outside. It always, I've heard this so many times, that it looks perfect. We had children, and I was raising his 3 children from previous relationships. We had this beautiful baby, a beautiful home, it was, on the inside, it was great for a month. And then things started becoming physically violent again. I had reached out to his family, and they had all seemed like, not that they were on my side. I never wanted anybody to take sides, but I needed them to know what was happening, and that I couldn't live in that environment, and I couldn't raise my children in that environment. So after 2 or 3 months of talking again to legal advocates and attorneys and friends and family. This is what's happening. I need to go. Finally, in April, it became bad enough that I left again.
And so at this point, you went to Oregon, I'm going to assume.
I went to Las Vegas again so I could make arrangements. Even though I was supposed to take, be able to take the document and the car and the money, he had actually ripped up the document shortly after I returned that said I could take my baby. I had my friend keep a copy for me, luckily. So I left with $20 in my pocket. Again, didn't know how I was going to get to Oregon. He continued to call and plead with me and, if you come back, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. And I was just, there was no way. I couldn't go back to that. My 13-year-old daughter was very upset. She was distraught. I couldn't let her see me like that anymore, and I couldn't see her like that anymore. And I knew that my baby was going to grow up in that environment, and that just wasn't okay. So I was just done. I told him that I would stay in Las Vegas for a while if if things would be calm enough for us to, his big thing was co-parenting, we need to be able to co-parent. That was his, after the pleading didn't work for me to come back, it was this co-parenting thing. I said, I agreed to stay in Las Vegas. He said, if you go to Oregon, I'll file for custody, I'll take her. I had enrolled my daughter in school and started looking for jobs right away. And he just would not let it go. He would not leave me alone. He was threatening me. And I was only 3 hours away, and just every day it was getting to the point where I was, couldn't sleep, and it was like I was still there. So I was terrified, and I called my aunt and uncle, and they flew the girls and I to Portland. Knowing that I had this document that said I could live in Oregon anyway, I was, I felt that was better. So I went to Portland. I filed a restraining order the day I got there, and the judge granted me that restraining order with no contact from my ex. Took emergency jurisdiction over the baby. And to say I was relieved is a huge understatement. It was a great day. I had been trapped and terrified for a long time, and I was, this whole time I was looking for the court system to protect us, and they did. So I was very grateful for that.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. So
it turned around very quickly.
Yeah, what happens for it to change from, you have this safe situation, you have your girls safe with your family, you're relieved, you have everything legally taken care of, and then what happens?
Yep. Then he contested the restraining order. I believe I got the notice 2 days before the time was up. In the meantime, his father had been contacting me again and offering me money and the car to drop the restraining order. And I told him no, that our safety was way more important than that. And I had absolutely nothing. But I was there with my baby, and I could nurse her without, without getting her ripped off my breast. And I could, be a human without being trapped and abused. So I had told him no, that I wasn't going to do that. They contested it, and I got a wonderful attorney out of a shelter in Portland. She was absolutely amazing. She took my case pro bono.
Wow.
And we went to, I was very, very lucky. She took my case. We went to court, I think 4 different times. There was 4 different hearings in which he actually went up to Oregon with his attorney. I had to testify in detail to the sexual abuse and the physical abuse for hours, and which was excruciating, as you can imagine. The main goal of those hearings was we were hoping that the Oregon judge would keep the jurisdiction, so that he couldn't file for custody and get me to come back down here and all that, based on safety. And, and my attorney was very, reassuring us, this is what the Violence Against Women Act is for, and this is, you've done all the right things, and I had the pictures, I had evidence. The ones where I was documenting things, I had been sending to my aunt, there was pictures of bruises and rooms just completely destroyed and things broken, baby bassinet tipped over, and just all kinds of ugly stuff. My neck covered in purple and red marks and bruises on my arms. I had also pictures of text messages that were screenshots from, I was describing incidents to my aunt, and then I would erase it from my phone, as a way of documenting, because I wasn't even allowed to read books. I couldn't write things down. He would find it and be really angry. So I couldn't use those, but I could use the pictures. So I was really relieved. This will help, describe to the judge what's going on. They'll keep the jurisdiction over the baby. Everything will be fine. The third hearing, I believe, I was served with a restraining order against me and custody papers.
So he filed a restraining order against you?
Yes.
And
9 weeks after I left.
Yeah.
9 weeks after I left and 6 weeks after I had filed my restraining order. He filed a restraining order on me, claiming that I'm mentally ill. I've been to mental hospitals in the past, which I have not. He claimed that I was abusing his children. He actually described incidents of things that he had done to his children and accused me of them in the paperwork. He also accused me of child abduction. He said that he had no idea where his daughter was and that I had taken off with her, and he had no clue where she was. Again, even though I was in shock and my attorney was in shock, I thought it would be fine because, again, I had all this evidence. I had probably up to 50 text messages a day of him saying how wonderful of a mother I am, and please come back, and your children need you, and you're so this, and, please, 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 begging me the whole time. It wasn't about the baby. It was about me coming back. He was never, he wanted me to send him pictures, but then it was the reason I was sending him pictures is so he could start a conversation, and I'm going to go to counseling. I'm going to get better so we can have our family. And I would say, no, I'm not coming back there.
Let me share my screen.
Over and over. So again,
let me share my screen with the audience so they can see some pictures of you with the baby and get a little impression of the love that you obviously had for your baby and still do. And
yes,
this is important because it shows. Let me see here. I got a couple of them. This is you and your baby and your 13-year-old daughter. She was 13 when all this was going down, and
she was 12 at the time. She's 13 now.
And this must have also been really hard on her to witness all of this. And
Very.
This is not her father. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. So I just want to share this because I want the audience to get a good impression of, what a loving, beautiful mom and little family you got going on here. And here he is filing a restraining order against you, accusing you of everything that he has, in fact, done to you and your baby. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so what did the court do with that restraining order?
Because of jurisdiction, we had what's called the UCCJEA hearing, the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Enforcement Act. I requested to appear by telephone. It was in Oregon. And the judge, Judge Corey Woodward, was assigned to the case here in California. He basically scolded me over the phone for even being in Oregon in the first place, and told me that my next hearing I was to appear in person. He took the jurisdiction back from Oregon. The Oregon judge in our last hearing basically had to give it up because the judges will talk. So apparently they had a conversation, and because the baby had been living in California her whole life, they said that was what was going to happen.
But how about your legal agreements that you had?
That was my biggest piece of evidence for me being in Oregon. And then also the fact that when there's domestic violence, the mother's supposed to be able to go where she needs to go to stay safe and keep her children safe. All of that was like it didn't happen. You know, I had all of it, and the judge in Oregon had seen all of that too. So I thought, okay, well, now the California judge will see what's going on here, and now we'll be okay. I can go back to Oregon. Got another wonderful attorney in California to take my case pro bono.
Wow.
I think it's really important to, a lot of, when people are being, abducting children and abusing children, you don't have lawyers take your case for nothing. I mean, these women were wonderful to me, and still are. And I think that's huge, just because, it just shows, again, that for me, I mean, I think, and that's why I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to become an attorney as well, so I can help women and children in the same situation. But I think that's really, for me, I was like, okay, see, these people are acknowledging it. The judge will acknowledge it too. For me, that was just a really good peace of mind for me to know, okay, whew, it'll be fine. I had to be here in California on July 20th, when we had an Oregon hearing on July 19th, which my ex got to appear by telephone. I had to go to a hearing at, I think it was 1:00 in the afternoon on July 19th in Portland, Oregon, and be in court in California on July 20th at 9 a.m. in Ridgecrest, where there's no airport. So with the baby, my aunt and I are running to get on the plane after court. It was totally insane. Basically because I was the bad guy that took off with the baby. It's, well, you need to be here. And I knew, I mean, I could go to jail if I didn't appear in court, or they could just take her. So I thought, okay, once I get down there, all these other people have acknowledged what happened and that I've done all the right things. I've taken all the right steps. My attorneys have told me that. All these advocates have told me that. My family's told me that. I know I'm doing the right things here. It'll be fine. The judge will see that. On July 20th, our first hearing in California, the judge basically told me that I had created chaos, that this is one of the most difficult cases he has ever seen, and that because the relationship broke down and you can't just go wherever you want to. He suggested very firmly that my ex and I come up with an agreement on our own. I knew that was not possible. I tried to talk to his father about me staying in Las Vegas instead, because I did not want to have to come back to Ridgecrest. He was refusing. It was like they knew what was going to happen, which was, the more I've thought about it this happened 7 months ago, and the more I've thought about it, it's just looking back on all of it, it's like they knew what was going to happen. I don't know how, and I can't prove it, but it's as if the judge and him were buddies that had lunch and discussed all of this beforehand. I mean, that's how insane it was. On July 20th, after court, I was allowed to take the baby to Las Vegas with my best friend, because that's where, I mean, we had no home. I hadn't been able to get a job yet. I'd been in court over and over again. I actually had gotten my old job back and an apartment in Oregon in the meantime of all of this, but I hadn't been able to actually start my job or move into my apartment because I'm getting called for court. So I thought, okay, well, worst case scenario, I'll be able to keep the baby in Las Vegas and we'll just start over here. At least I have my best friend of 20 years, you know, she's like a sister to me, and we'll stay with her. You know, we had our own rooms in her home with her and her husband and her kids. We'll start over there. It'll be fine. I thought at least the judge will let me go to Las Vegas. That's only 3 hours away. He'll be able to have some sort of supervised visitation at that point. On August 1st, that was our next hearing. In the meantime, he had given my ex weekend visitation with the baby from 9 to 5 on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That was 2 weeks in a row between July 20th and August 1st. And he took, I think, 3 of those days and came and picked her up, you know, for the day, and then, which traumatized me enough, just those days, you know, for going with him. But I thought, you know, on August 1st, on our next hearing, that's probably what'll happen. She'll have to go with him from 9 to 5, but it could be a lot worse than that. So, you know, we'll just get through it. It'll be okay. I think it was 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's how long our hearing was on August 1st. I feel like I probably said maybe 100 words the entire thing. It was, my attorney here in California calls it the dog and pony show between the two of them. It was really bad. There was like no time for me or my attorney to say anything. The evidence that we presented, at one point the judge actually told me that I could have done that to my own neck. That's in the transcripts. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
referring to the pictures.
What's his name again? Judge Woodward, right?
Corey Woodward, yes. He's no longer a judge, so he won't be able to do that to anybody else, luckily.
So you supposedly choked yourself to the pictures of that. Ridiculous.
Yes. 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 And then took off with the baby, you know, because I'm a mentally ill child abuser. Yeah. So at the end of the hearing, he had said even that primary custody should go to the mother because the mother's breastfeeding and the baby's always been with the mother. I had even testified, I mean, he wanted absolutely nothing to do with her the entire time we were together. There was, you know, can you hold the baby while I take a shower? Ooh, I don't want to, you know, what is it gonna, it's gonna cry, you know, it was what he called her. It was just it. I had testified to that. I had testified with my pictures, my story. My aunt testified to me sending the pictures. My best friend testified to hearing him on the phone screaming at me and threatening to come drag me back to California when I was staying in Las Vegas. All this stuff, and this whole time I'm thinking, then when he says that primary custody should go to the mother, okay, phew, yes, he sees this at least. 5 minutes later, he turned around and said that primary custody will go to the father. He said, Miss Bradley, if you're going, he said, if you're going to up and take away, then I'm going to up and take away.
I mean, how is this anything about the best interest of the child? This sounds like a total revenge action. Whereas here you had a legal document that your ex signed and allowed you to go back to Oregon. You have all this evidence of abuse. You've been in a women's shelter. People are testifying to the abuse. You have pictures. And here's a judge that's saying, you left, so now I'm going to take the baby from you.
Yeah. So he said that if I moved back to Ridgecrest, that we could share 50-50 custody without having to litigate. Of course, my ex was very, I want to co-parent with Miss Bradley, and there's, I have no problem doing that, and I just want to see my baby, and it was sickening. So I had to drop her off after court. I got an hour with her after court. I had to drop her off with him at 6:00 that night.
Describe what happened and how you felt. What was this like?
Excruciating. I can't describe it. Excuse me. I can't put it into words. It was excruciating. I just screamed and cried the entire way back to Las Vegas. I was, you're in shock too. I mean, I don't even know what was going through my head, if anything. I was just sobbing. There's nothing that can describe that at all. I had even argued, my lawyer argued too. She was breastfeeding. She had never been away from me other than my days in court. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was, the only one to change her diapers, give her a bath, nurse her, sing to her, put her to sleep. She slept with me, right next to me, nursing every single night. And all of a sudden, sorry, this 13-month-old who's never been away from me.
This is
it was awful.
Just unbelievable. It is unbelievable that any judge would order such a ridiculous ruling to have your breastfeeding baby taken from you. I mean, that's like the worst thing ever that can happen to you. I mean, and I understand,
as a punishment, basically.
I understand you have no words for it, because how do you even describe that? I mean, that's beyond words.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened then? Did your ex even communicate at this point what was happening with the baby? And I mean, what happened then?
After I went back to Las Vegas, I didn't have anywhere to stay in Ridgecrest other than the shelter. I knew that if I had tried to take my visitation, because the judge gave me visitation on the weekends from Friday at 6 until Sunday at 6. So I knew that if I was staying in the shelter that my ex would say, you can't have her or whatever. So I went back to Las Vegas to try to figure out, what was I going to do? I mean, I was on, I spent one day in bed. I literally could not move. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I think I gave myself 2 days to just cry and, check out almost. There was nothing that I could do. If I, what am I going to do? This crossed my mind, of course. I'm going to go get my baby and run away. I mean, that's look at what happened when I did that before, and I did it legally, and I did it the right way. All these crazy things are going through your mind because you're so traumatized. I gave myself 2 days to rest. Got on the phone, started looking for apartments and jobs in Ridgecrest. I was told by the judge that my visitation would be in Ridgecrest. I'm not allowed to leave Ridgecrest with my baby at all. It's a very small town, very small military town. So I stayed in Las Vegas with my best friend during that week. Looked forward to Friday when I could see her. One of my best friends in Portland. She paid for a rental car for me to drive to Ridgecrest and a hotel. Stayed in a hotel with my baby over the weekend. And then during the week when I didn't have her, I was just on the phone, what do I do? What do I do? And I enrolled myself in college, found an apartment, and I found two really good friends that I had known before but wasn't allowed to talk to when I was with him. And their numbers had been deleted from my phone a long time ago. It dawned on me suddenly to get a hold of them on Facebook. And I told them what was going on, and they said, you could stay with us. And I was like, oh, thank God, so I'd be right down the street from my baby at least. So I moved in with them on August 12th, got into my apartment finally on September 12th. So the day I got back, he had already been texting and saying, one day it was, you can check on the baby anytime you want. I'll let you know how she's doing. And then when I would check on her, he would say, you need to stop bothering me and harassing me. And I was like, what? And then he kept texting about the relationship and all this stuff. And I was like, what? I was so confused. This was not about her at all. Again, still, the day I got back, he called the police on me after I picked her up to have my weekend with her. He found out that I was staying, he at least had me. I don't know if he has me followed still, but he had me followed because he was asking me why I went to see my lawyer, and he was asking why I was staying with these particular people. He was really angry that I was staying with them. And he called the police and told them that I'm staying with my drug addict, child molester boyfriend, and that the police need to go get the baby. Mm-hmm. So the police came. Thank God they saw what was really happening, that I was just staying with friends, a married couple, I'm sure as a lot of protective mothers know, the last thing on your mind is a relationship after you go through this craziness. So they saw what was going on and they left. Thank God they let me keep her. He asked me out to lunch on that Sunday, wanted to come up with a parenting plan. And it was nuts. I went to lunch. I agreed on a very public place. I let my friends know where I was at, and he said that I could have her while he was at work during the day. So I started borrowing my friend's car. Every morning at 4:30, I would get up and go get her, and then have to drop her back off after he got off work. And then also I would have my weekends. So basically I became her nanny, but I was very, very happy. I mean, it wasn't even 2 weeks after court that I got her back. I was just thrilled, as you can imagine. So I'm spending almost every day with her now.
It's clearly not about the baby at all for him. It's all about, inviting you and then saying, hey, you're harassing me, and then calling the cops. It's just it's a tool. Yeah. The baby is a tool, a pathological tool of coercive control. And that's what the whole game is about.
Yes.
Some sick, twisted game.
Exactly.
To these guys. Yeah. But the upside of it is that he got more than he bargained for, because all of a sudden he had to make bottles and clean diapers and wipe snotty noses. And he figured, well, I don't want to deal with that, so I'm going to call Holly back and have her take care of the baby. And so the good thing about that is that at least you had her back again, at least for more time than the court allowed you to. So how has this developed over time now? Because now we're in March 2017. So you've been in this situation. How has it developed over time?
It's been insanity pretty much the whole time. When I got my apartment, he agreed to do week on, week off. So I have her for a full week and a full weekend. And then he has her for a full week and a full weekend. But during his week, I pick her up in the morning before he goes to work, and then he picks her up after he gets off work. So basically, again, I'm her nanny. She's with him from like 4:30 to when she goes to bed, about 8 on those nights. And then sometimes he'll be out of town on his weekends and I'll get to keep her. His new girlfriend is pregnant with triplets, so he's very busy and a lot of time.
How many children does he have in total?
He's got 4 and 3 on the way.
And a judge should look at that too, that doesn't get weighed. Yeah, that doesn't get weighed whatsoever in this entire story. This guy is basically getting a whole bunch of different women pregnant. He's getting,
right.
So is the other motivation here for him that he might not want to pay child support? That's why he's doing this?
Yeah. Yeah, he actually, in the beginning of the year, he asked me to lower the child support to $300 a month. And when I told him that he's only paying $473 when it was originally supposed to be $1150, the judge, of course, the same judge, ruled that. And when I wouldn't look, I just said something like, oh, I think what we've been doing is fine, and dropped it. He said that if I didn't lower it, he was going to just keep the papers the way it was and I could see her on the weekends. There's been lots of stuff like that, He's kept her from me. The last time he kept her from me for 6 days, he said that his girlfriend was going to be caring for her from now on, and that when his girlfriend's unavailable, that she'll go to daycare. I'm in school full-time from home, and I work from home, so I'm totally available 100% of the time. I tried to get a job for my friend, the same friend that I stayed with owns a clothing store in town. When I worked there for one day, he called me and was freaking out, screaming and yelling, and if you don't quit, you won't see the baby, basically. He doesn't like the friend that that I was working for. So, and of course he's a male, so, I'm automatically sleeping with him or dating him or whatever, just because he's a guy.
It's none of his business. You guys are broken up. It's none of his business what you do, where you go, who you hang out with. He's using the baby to continue to have you in his life, no matter what.
Yes. Yeah.
So
he's either sending me songs, before and trying to get, I think the first main goal of these guys is to get you back. If they get custody of your child, they think, oh, she'll come back. She's not going to be without her child. I just prayed and prayed and prayed and knew that I would have my baby back. Lots of, sending me songs and pictures of us and wanting me to come back, and no way am I going back there, to, screaming and threatening and not allowing me to even work. It's no different than when I was there, really, except for I'm not getting hit anymore or hurt or trapped in rooms because I have my own place. Some extent of freedom, but yeah, it's, she's continued to be used as a pawn. She's now 20 months old. She's running around and talking, and I mean, my focus is her and her health and her safety, and his focus is, how can I control Holly? And it's insane.
Can you share with the audience what this has been like for your other children? Because I know you have, we've seen the picture of your other daughter, but you also have a son, correct?
Yes, I do. Yes. He's going to be 17 in 9 days. He lives in Oregon with his father. That was one of the hugest reasons why I was really happy to be able to live in Oregon with my girls and be able to be with my son. I raised him until he was 14, and then he went to live with his dad. I just had him down here for a visit recently, but other than that, we hadn't seen each other in 6 months. It's been very difficult for him, watching, watching all of this unfold, not being able to be around his baby sister, and of course being really worried about his mom. And I mean, I don't share details with my children by any means, but they know what's going on. It's very hard. My daughter as well, my 13-year-old, she lived in the house with me. So that, I mean, she saw stuff, but it's been very difficult for both of them. We're I'm very blessed though. They're amazing children, and they're really strong. And, we just all know that this is going to be okay. You just have to hold on to that. You know how that is. You just have to hold on to that. And they do a really good job of that.
Well, you are clearly incredibly strong. Obviously it's an excruciating situation. But I think the kids probably see how your baby is being used in this situation. Kids are not crazy. They know what's going on. They can feel what's going on. Even if you don't share it with them, they know. And, what is really important in your story is the fact that your other children, that situation is not weighed in this entire, this judge, Corey Woodward, let me not even put into words what I think of him, but it is clear that this is an insane custody decision, which it is for all of the protective mothers who lose custody of their children to abusive fathers, but particularly when there's a baby and there's other kids involved, and your baby is still breastfeeding. I mean, my God, that judge is a criminal as far as I'm concerned. He should stand trial at the Human Rights Tribunal in The Hague for his human rights violations. And so
I agree.
And I think this goes for all these judges. We need to get rid of this, the fact that we cannot hold them accountable. And I'm interested in the fact that he's not on the bench anymore. I wonder if you can sue him now, since he's no longer in his
checking into it.
Yeah. Intentional towards, and I would put the amount somewhere at $9 or $10 million or something. And as soon as your son turns 18, have him sue the judge too. That would be my advice. But I want to share my screen and share an article that came out this week that is on this topic. It is on the topic of male violence being the worst problem in the world. An article that was published in the Huffington Post this week. And I'm seeing a lot of articles come out of the UK in the last several months on this topic, on the abuse of power in the court system by these domestic terrorists, what I call them. I think it's very important for the audience to realize that this is happening, which is why we have the show, obviously, but I think many people don't realize how terrible the issue really is. For those who are new to this, if you're just picking up on this show and you haven't watched any other Hell is for Children shows, here's the research. Let me share this one, the Leadership Council page. Here's the research that evidences that abusive fathers get custody of their kids if they fight for it in 85% of the times. I think it's 80% when there's domestic violence and 85% if there's child molestation. Those numbers can be found here. There's a lot of research on this. I mean, this is a scroll-a-thon. I can scroll on and on. It is a myth to think that, and I think I got the, this is another show. It is a myth that mothers lie about abuse. It is actually Dr. Saunders from the Department of Justice, who concluded that men are 16 times more likely to lie about abuse than women. I think that's very important to get across, because we need to break through these myths, which is one of the reasons why we have this show. Now, when you were at the domestic violence shelter, did they give you any type of legal support? Is that how you got the pro bono attorney, or?
No, actually, they offered to go into court with me for support, just as what would be called a support person. Their main advocate there. She's very, very nice and very helpful. And I had talked to her on the phone several times before because I kept planning on leaving, and then I got too scared and I would stay. She was very, encouraging, and we're here and we can come and pick you up and this and that. But they would only be able to be a support person for me in court.
And that's another thing we need to change. I hope that the people that supported you with the shelter also watch this show. And I want to thank them for supporting you. And I hope that they can push for more legal support, start working with attorneys who help the protective mothers.
Absolutely.
Keep custody of their kids. And let me share my screen here with the findings of the American Bar Association. It's very interesting because, these 10 custody myths that they published really outline everything that you've just shared. It validates your entire experience and the experience of all my guests here. Yet we still are dealing with many very aggressive attorneys who fight for the fathers. In my own case, for example, it's not about my daughter. It's about his rights. It's constantly about the father's rights, not about children's rights. And this is the whole point. They admit it, right? So it is clearly then we can only conclude that these attorneys are only in it for the money. And the fact that you had 2 pro bono attorneys is extremely rare. From all the thousands of mothers that I have, protected mothers that are in these situations, I have barely ever seen that. Yeah. So you must have an angel, a good guardian angel.
I have a lot of them.
Yeah. So this is a really good document for people to share because, again, here is the American Bar Association admitting that abusive fathers get full custody. Here they named the number 70%, but in the other research I showed it goes up to 85%. But we can all agree then that it's, 3/4 of the abusive fathers get full custody.
Yeah.
And
that they're more likely to file in the first place. I think that's really important too, because to maintain the control.
Right.
It not being about what's best for the children, especially when you have a stay-at-home mom that's breastfeeding, that's not best for the child. I can't imagine taking a baby away from a breastfeeding mother who's been their only care provider their entire life. I mean, it's just disgusting.
And that's here at myth 8, right? Many batterers' motivation to intimidate and control their victims through the children increases after separation due to the loss of other methods of exerting control.
Exactly.
In my own case, my ex actually put in a document in one of his motions, he said, Geerta is allowed to live in 100-mile radius from my house. And she's only allowed
to be his roommate.
I mean, these guys are delusional. They're delusional, and I'm sure he thought after he took my daughter from the Netherlands to California that I would follow. The answer is no. You cannot control another person like that. You can try and force your will on other people, but all you're doing is making your children suffer.
Exactly.
And this is what we get. These children experience trauma bonding with the abusive parents. They form unusually strong but unhealthy ties to the batterer as a survival technique, often referred to as Stockholm Syndrome. And I think this is a very interesting document, these 10 myths that we just looked at. And I'm really pissed off with the American Bar Association, because if they know this, and we file these complaints against these attorneys, why aren't they cleaning house?
Yeah.
So it's like they report on their own corruption.
But do nothing about it.
But then they do nothing about it. And we're dealing with these awful judges that have immunity. At least it seems so.
Well, yeah, because it should be a crime to take a child from their mother, their perfectly good, fit mother.
It is an absolute crime to
That's
remove
what's kidnapping.
a breast. Yeah, that's the kidnapping. That's the kidnapping. The kidnapping is allowing the father to remove a breastfeeding baby who's not even a year old from her mother. It is just the worst thing that and the reason why I asked you to put it into words is because I'm trying to find the words for it, and I haven't lost a baby. I have lost my 10-year-old. When my daughter was a baby, my ex also grabbed her from my breast as I was breastfeeding her, and he would run out the house with her. Like, see, I have her. It's like, okay, so, like,
he'd put her in the car seat a couple times when he was wasted and say that they were going to go to the store.
I ended up spending most of my daughter's baby time driving around with her in the car to get away from the house.
I did that a few times, but he took my keys a lot. I wasn't allowed. Well, I was allowed to pick the kids up from school and go grocery shopping, but that's it.
Now, the other thing, when you were testifying about the abuse in court, and you shared that you testified on that in Oregon court for an entire day, was your ex present, or a couple days? Was he present during these? And that's totally inappropriate as well. Mm-hmm. You should never have to be in the same courtroom or in any type of forced mediation with the person that you have identified as the perpetrator of abuse.
Yeah.
I mean, that's outrageous. And I know that in the UK, new legislation is being presented and weighed for abusers to never be allowed in the same courtroom as their victims, which I think is great progress. And we need that here in the United States. We need it here in the Netherlands as well.
Absolutely.
That by itself is outrageous, and you're incredibly strong for dealing with that by itself. It's like, oh my gosh.
There's no other option. You know how that is.
Well, I have the luxury to call in over the phone when I call into my court cases now. But that has a disadvantage too, because I cannot see the glances that are being exchanged between the judges and the attorneys.
Right.
Like you pointed out, there's a high chance that the father of your ex had some kind of connection to this judge, or that he knew that the judge was a father's rights judge. Yeah. That could also be the case, right? These guys forum shop.
Yeah, on our original, one of the original dockets, there was a different judge's name, and then all of a sudden it was him. So, and again, I don't know how, and I can't prove that, but I know somehow there was supposed to be a different judge hearing our case.
Now, for the viewers that are watching, if you have a case that's fairly new, you can file in California, you can file a motion to have the judge recused and to
Yes.
request a different judge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to consider. Once you're in the case for a while, for longer than a year or so, they usually won't grant those motions. You're kind of stuck with the same judge.
Right.
Here in the Netherlands, it's the opposite. For every time you go to court, there's a new judge. So they never know what's going on. No.
Right.
So that's the other extreme that we don't want either. But,
right.
Clearly these judges have some kind of pro-abuse agenda. So the fact that you're making your story public is extremely admirable. Because a lot of the mothers will say like, oh, I'm not going to go public because I don't want to get retaliated against, because this is what happens a lot, particularly in the United States. But your goal is the opposite. So share us with what you're doing in terms of publicity and your goals for your career.
First of all, I think it's really, even though it's scary, and I mean, I'm retaliated against for going to work. So, it's very scary, and it's difficult to have this hanging over your head constantly. But I think we become more of a prisoner when we subject ourselves to that and continue to let that happen. We have to stand up and say, no, this isn't right. You don't have control over my life. Only I have control over my life. And, I think it empowers other women to do the same. There have been times where I've been too scared to make a decision or whatever, but you just get so sick of that. Like I was telling you the other day, I feel like you get to a point where you're so tired of being scared all the time that nothing scares you anymore. You're just done being afraid, and that's not living. It's not being free. And so I think that's really important too. As far as what I'm doing, I've been writing a book for the last couple months. I'm hoping to have it done by the end of the year. I'm a busy girl.
Excellent.
Yes. Want to share my story to empower, of course, first of all. And then also, even though, of course, we ask ourselves, what did I do? Where did I go wrong? I know I've been told by several professionals that I took all the right steps and I did everything right. But there's one thing that I didn't do, and that was call the police. I've been told a couple times that if I would have had a criminal restraining order, that this probably wouldn't have happened. I don't know if I believe that because I can't believe what did happen. But when I remember being so scared to call the police when something was happening, because he goes to jail and then he comes home, and then what? I'm stuck here. I have no friends, no family. I'm not allowed to do anything. I was living in his home, away from everyone. So then what was my fear? But I would say I would help, tell other women to call the police. It's what they're there for. And maybe that would help cut down on this, because when we go into a court, one of the things I want to change is having in family court, perjury is totally accepted. And the cases where women do make up abuse allegations, or where men make up abuse allegations, hurts us who have had those things happen to us, and we go into the courtroom expecting the court to protect us. And because of all these other people being able to lie about it, we're looked at like, oh, well, maybe that didn't happen. I don't really know. And there's so many of us out there that even though you said, women are less likely to make it up, but they still do. And, in criminal court, perjury it's looked at as unacceptable. In family court, it flies, no problem.
Absolutely. And let me add to that really good point that you're making, that it's not just the abusive fathers that make up the false allegations. We're also dealing with social workers
Yes.
that lie. and attorneys that lie and supervisors that lie. I really believe that the steps that protective mothers like you and I can take is taking this out of family court.
Yeah.
I'm looking into starting to file intentional torts against the individual players, the attorney, the therapist, the supervisor, the father. Let's sue the hell out of them.
Yeah.
You know, if we can't win in family courts, then we're going to have to make them pay another way, because
Individually. Yeah.
individually
Because
go
they're all
after them.
committing crimes, essentially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they want to go do that, then they're going to have to face up to the consequences of that.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go federal.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I would love to get my case in front of a couple of federal judges.
I would too.
You
Absolutely.
know? And I'm not saying that we're going to win, but at least we would bring this to another level of awareness in the judicial system. And we need to do it massively, by the thousands.
We do. I had no idea that this was happening at all. I mean, I think most of us don't know. When it happens to us, you're so confused. I had no idea. And of course, you know, you're making 1,000 phone calls and you're Googling everything and you're asking a million questions to anybody who will give you 5 minutes. I had no idea that this was happening to anybody.
Me neither.
I'm the mother. I'm her mother. I was breastfeeding. I didn't think anything of it. He was abusive. It was terrible. I wanted us to be safe. That's why they created the Violence Against Women Act. Why is it even there?
Well, some activists say that it's there to create more victims, right? I mean, these people also get funding, and they're not going to have a job if there are no victims. So this is part of that pro-abuse industry, right? Mm-hmm. The more children there are that are damaged and traumatized, the more help they will need. Yes. And the more mothers that are victims, right? So it's not about tackling the root of the issue, which mm-hmm. is the fact that, and we'll share that Huffington Post article again, that male violence is the biggest problem in the world. This is the root of it. This is what we need to look at. And this is the problem that needs to be tackled at the core. The moral corruption, sexual corruption, the pro-psychopath type of culture that we have.
Exactly.
Where it's all about the ego and I want my way and you're going to do what I want you to do. That type of mentality needs to go. Mm-hmm. And, we need to start obviously in the homes, but in the educational system, there's a lot we can do too. Yeah. One of the things that I'm thinking about doing is creating some books for children, picture books for children, where we explain to them what's acceptable and what's not in terms of things that go on in the home, right? And how they can safely report about it. Mm-hmm. And we need to educate folks in the schools how to recognize these types of situations and
absolutely.
For mothers to have free legal aid like you got, mm-hmm. That's terrific. We need that for all the mothers, for all the protective mothers. Mm-hmm. And we need to take the financial incentive out of all these stories. One of the solutions that I'm bringing up in my documentary is custody insurance. So
I saw that. I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's just an idea. I don't know if it would work, but this is just where I'm thinking, right?
Yeah. It takes that. It makes it equal. So it's not about the money. It brings it. This is really about what's best for the children.
Yeah, and possibly
not about who has more money.
It would speed up the cases probably too. Mm-hmm. Because an insurance company would not want to have these cases drag on and on and on, because they would be paying for the attorneys so they would want a faster
open it and shut it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be in their benefit to have good custody outcomes mm-hmm. That are in the best interest of the child. if you think about marriage, it's a contract, right? And if in the breaking of the contract violations occur, it should be the same as any type of business contract that you have, right?
Yes.
If you want to pull yourself out of the contract, you should be able to have insurance to help you with that, to make sure that you don't get screwed in the process.
Yeah.
So that's some of the thinking that I'm doing, but we definitely need more attorneys that are on the side of the child, you know, that are against this pro-abuse agenda. Now, from during the intake, you told me that you plan to become a lawyer for protective mothers, right?
Yes.
So that's really wonderful. So
I start law school next January.
Oh, perfect. So you're already enrolled and ready to go?
Almost ready.
See, this is wonderful. And then maybe you can help us pro se moms with tips and tricks and techniques. You know, I'm doing all this pro se from the Netherlands, and I make procedural errors. My motions are good, but I make procedural errors because there's no handbook on how to do it. So it's a lot of Googling and a lot of calling, and not everybody gives correct information, so I make errors. So we need women like you who are young and going into the judicial system and changing it from the inside out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's what needs to happen. And it's funny too, because I mean, I'm sure this is the same for you, but this is not ever something that I saw myself doing. You know, there's nothing that ever geared me towards wanting to be an attorney or anything like that. There's not 1 minute of the day that I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do to help. I can't stand this. It's just sick.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Our most painful experiences lead us into what we're passionate about. So, you know, just take it as that and do with it what we will. Hopefully make a lot of changes.
Well, my passion was originally art, so it's very far removed from where I'm at. But I feel the calling to do something about this situation, because what happens to me and my daughter should never, ever happen to any other mother and child. So if I can just help one mom out there.
That's what I always say too. Absolutely. Even just to empower them too, because, you know, recognizing that what happened to you is completely wrong and completely unnatural. And it was an injustice committed against you. You know, be able to stand up for that. And like you said before, instead of staying quiet, you know.
If you had stayed quiet, you would have gone against your own higher soul's purpose.
Yeah, there's no way.
It's not possible. You would
myself would not let me do that.
Right.
No.
Yes.
No.
I mean, and this is the whole part of it. It is such an incredibly unnatural phenomenon. I think you point that out really well. This goes against all laws of nature.
Yeah.
To remove a baby, a breastfeeding baby from mom is like the why do we even have to explain this?
We shouldn't have to. No.
You know, I mean, this is like
a thing.
Basic natural law. I remember my daughter being 8 years old, and we were in this whole battle was going on, and we were watching like National Geographic or something, and she came up to me and she says, "Mom, babies belong with mom." You can see it on every nature show. Why is it that these fathers want to go against nature? And I was like, all right, so if an 8-year-old child can get it, come on, people.
Yeah.
Do we really need to go and explain this?
Right.
And like have lectures about it and shows about it? It's just like I think
that's the point too, is the non-abusive fathers don't do that. You know, that when my son and my daughter were babies, their fathers never would have taken them from me. That's terrible. You know, it wouldn't have happened. And
well, that's an excellent point. Brings me to the following. there's a lot of fathers out there who want this 50-50 shared custody, mandatory. And I let me just say, I understand that. I do. I understand it because it would solve a lot of problems. However, there is no one-size-fits-all solution like that when you're dealing with domestic terrorists, with guys who are strangling pregnant mothers, with pedophiles. There's no mandatory 50-50 possible. Let me share my screen here because a new law is going into effect in Florida on July 1st of this year. And it is an anti-parental alienation law. Now, when you read it, actually, it looks great on paper, right? It says, the bill is to be entitled an act relating to child psychological abuse, amending section such and such, revising the definition of the term harm, revising a provision relating to mandatory reporting requirements for child abuse, abandonment, or neglect to include child psychological abuse, which is great, requiring the Board of Psychology within the Department of Health to revise the continuing education requirements for renewal of a license to practice psychology to include child psychological abuse. Now that sounds great, but where it goes then, right, it goes into parental alienation. Inflicts mental injury as defined in subsection 42 on a child through the use of manipulation or psychological abuse, including but not limited to parental alienation, which creates significant developmental pathology, personality disorder pathology, or delusional psychiatric pathology as diagnosed by a mental health professional licensed under Chapter 490 or Chapter 491. And it explains a little bit more about the parental alienation. Now, when you first read this, you think, well, that's great. That means that protective mothers can get their kids back because we can show that these fathers are taking our kids. However, we need to really take a good look at these laws because the terminology used is what is used against us in all these cases. When parental alienation is what's used against protective mothers when they report child abuse or domestic violence.
Yep.
So, in order for this law not to, be abused again by the father's rights guys who have probably, got the bill introduced in the first place, we need to make sure that these policymakers truly understand the dynamics of the current custody procedures.
Of what's really going on.
So I want to point that out because we need folks in Florida to bring this to the attention to the policymakers as well as to the Board of Psychology within the Department of Health. And the thing is that the Department of Health produces reports about maternal deprivation. So, we need them to include this in these types of bills, right?
Yeah.
We need to really, they need to look at the Safe Child Act as far as I'm concerned. Which mandates that any form of domestic violence and child abuse is what needs to get looked at, that evidence needs to get weighed.
Yep.
Look what happened in your situation. You have the images, you have the pictures, you have screenshots, you have people testifying for you, and the judge turns it around and says, you inflicted that strangle marks on your neck yourself. Excuse me, that right
be
there.
Pretty strong to do that.
Why would any pregnant mother strangle herself and then take pictures of it? I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. As far as I'm concerned, Judge Corey Woodward, if you're watching right now, Judge Woodward, I'm glad you're off the bench. Please do not return.
Yes.
And, do not educate any other judges with this type of with these types of human rights violations. And I don't know how these people sleep at night.
I don't either. I don't think they're people.
That's a really good point. I have come to the same conclusion. These are not human beings. I don't know what they are, but they are some type of, either they're possessed or they're some kind of other worldly entity. But, no normal human being would ever remove a breastfeeding baby from
they lack conscience and empathy, and they're not human as far as I'm concerned.
And for those types of people to be in these positions is unheard of. And where are the demonstrations? We need to be around the courthouse when your case goes to court by the thousands.
Yeah.
We need to completely fill the entire neighborhood with protesting people. Mm-hmm. That is what we need. And we need the non-abusive fathers to come and help us with this instead of, I don't understand why they want to make this an issue. It seems like they are making it into a gender issue, whereas it should be an anti-abuse campaign.
Yeah.
And these fathers' rights groups need to clean house and get rid of the pedophiles and domestic terrorists.
Definitely.
Because otherwise they lose credibility, and it's just a pro-abuse agenda that they sponsor them. I don't see it any other way. And the label parental alienation needs to go, because it is used against us by, by all these fathers' rights guys. Whereas in fact, they are the ones who are doing all the alienating and the.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's completely twisted around. It's totally backwards.
It's an upside down reality universe that we find ourselves in. I had no idea either that this was going on until I actually went to court. And had, my ex admitted in court that he was a heroin and crack cocaine addict, and the judge gave him more custody instead of less. And I walked out of that courtroom, and I looked at that time, I still had an attorney, and he said, "Oh, that's so great. You didn't lose custody." And I was like, "What?
What?
Excuse me. What is this about?
What are you talking about? My child's going to be with a drug addict."
Yeah. And that's when I started understanding that something was really, really wrong.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to explain. This is what's so isolating for us and our families and friends and environments, that they're not aware that this is what's going on in family court. And just this week, I was telling someone my situation, and they said, "Well, there must have been something you did wrong to lose custody."
Right.
And it's like, and that's like a 5-minute conversation in a store. So how do you, at that moment, how do you transfer this knowledge and this experience to these people who are ignorant to what's going on?
Yeah.
That's really what we're up against. These custody myths.
Well, and it sounds so insane. It does. Before you know what's going on, like, wait a minute, that doesn't happen. You must be on drugs, or you must be, something's wrong here. Yeah. You left your kids with a bad babysitter. I mean, I don't know, but something.
Hey, you're a child abductor, so am I, right?
Yeah. I alienate. The judge actually said at the end of the hearing that my ex needs time to reform his bond with the baby. And I thought,
right.
That's not.
What bond? Yeah.
What bond was that? There's no bond. It was just control.
He called the baby it. He called the baby it. Please go change it.
Yeah.
How's that a bond? And that brings us to the reunification therapy, right? They do this trauma bonding therapy.
Yeah.
They force the children to bond with the perpetrating fathers. And if they resist, they end up being sent to Children's Village, which is like a detention center for children.
I heard about that too. I can't even, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point. Like, how can we inform other mothers who are not yet in our situation that this is what is going on in family court? I think writing the book is a great idea. I hope that the documentary that I made, and I'll share it again, well, that actually brings me up. Some video starts playing, so it needs our attention, so I'm going to bring it up. This was the video that just started playing. Respected attorney Robin Yeamans shares here on YouTube in a 5-minute, not even a 5-minute, a 1-minute video that she cannot even win a case in family court, and she's a Stanford-trained attorney with 44 years of experience and also an appellate court attorney. That really says enough.
Yeah.
You know, it's this type of testimony that we need. And I have included this clip in the, this is what I wanted to share in the judicial child trafficking documentary. It's 3 hours, but it is informing from beginning to end the nightmare that we are going through and some of my thoughts on it. And we can always do more episodes on this as information, becomes available that I haven't looked at yet, because these are just my thoughts and feelings. What are some of your ideas around reform?
Definitely the perjury issue. I think that's a really big deal, because in criminal court, again, you know, that's a crime. When it comes to children, it should be a crime as well.
Right.
You know, there's an assumption. I guess it's only an assumption. In my case, it definitely was not acknowledged. And on top of that, the judge had said, that I could have given myself those bruises, but I know it's too insane to even grasp. But I think at least in California, there's what's called a 53% preponderance of evidence on domestic violence. So if it was more than 53% or more than likely that it happened, that it happened. And there was 100% preponderance of evidence in my case. I mean, I had pictures, I had witness testimony, all of that. If that's at least an assumption or a rebuttal, I'm not exactly positive what it is right now. But why isn't that even being considered? This whole, like I said, the Violence Against Women Act here, we have this preponderance of evidence. If it was more than 53% likely that it occurred, then why isn't it being enforced?
Yeah, and
if it's a law code, why isn't it being enforced in family court? So we're putting children in abusive homes on purpose is basically what's happening.
Yes,
but
that is it.
The abuse end. If the children are in abusive homes, then they either become abused themselves or become abusers themselves. So we're just this whole, like you say, the agenda, that's what it is. It's done on purpose. I really believe that.
Yeah, because if our children are not going to be abusing other people as they are adults, then there's no money to be made off of their children and their children and their children, right? I mean, that's what this comes down to. But I want to share my screen here and share an article about this court case here where attorney Sean McMillan went after these social workers in Orange County and sued them for lying, exactly your point, the perjury point. And this mother and her daughter actually were awarded huge financial damages, which is great. And this is, again, this is what I think we should do. We should go after all the individual players for lying in court. And that is unlawful, and we need to hold them accountable and really make them pay some big bucks to go after that. Now, another way another topic that ties into that is all these court cases should be recorded, digital recording of all these court cases. And this should be made available for free to all involved parties. Because then if you have the evidence of the perjury and the lie, you can take your next step and go after this corruption.
Right. Sometimes there's not even a reporter in there for transcripts. So then what? What do they, luckily I had a reporter. I have my full transcript from both hearings, but as well as the ones in Oregon. But sometimes there's not even a reporter. So then what, how can you prove that? I know as far as in my, the last hearing on August 1st, there was that abduction claim, but yet there's hundreds and hundreds of text messages of him acknowledging that I was in Las Vegas with the baby and having me send him pictures. That was clear to everyone in the courtroom, but no perjury charges.
No, it's the same with me. My ex went to all, the DA and the police and Washington State Department and, my God, the missing and exploited children to tell them that I had abducted our daughter, whereas in fact he had given permission for us to go to the Netherlands, and he had not even started a court case in the Netherlands to ask us to come back. So, right. This is the type of stuff that needs to be looked at, how these abusers manipulate authorities and use the system so they all become their puppets in their game of coercive control of us and our kids. Yeah, the system abuse. I had no idea that was even a thing. I had never heard of that in my life. I'm like, what system abuse? What, as far as the restraining order and the manipulation of the court and everything else. I had never even heard of this stuff. I had no idea. Yeah, it's called legal abuse, and it's actually it's in the DSM. Yeah. So, and this is what these guys will constantly drag you to court. Interestingly enough, I started fighting back in my own case since July last year, whereas my ex has been fighting me in court since 2009, and his attorney claimed that I am now vexatiously litigating. I had to laugh because I think in this 8 years that we've been in court, I maybe filed 3 or 4 motions, whereas my ex probably filed at least 40. So it's interesting to see, though, that they can't handle when the shoe is on the other foot. And that's why I do believe that fighting back is the way to go. We have this Dutch expression, it's called, give them a cookie of their own dough.
I like it.
So, but that takes a lot of work, and I understand it's not for all protective mothers. I understand that some protective mothers give up. It's exhausting and it's intense. It takes a lot of energy, and these court cases are downright toxic. I mean, I go into court knowing that I'm standing in front of corrupt people. Virtually standing because I'm on the phone, but I know what I'm dealing with. It's like wrestling snakes or something. Yeah. That's what it feels like. So I think the idea is to go into it without having hopes or expectations, but yet doing it, because once your child is 18 and they can access the court records, they can see that you went out there and fought back. And if the system doesn't do anything with it or wipes it all under the rug, well, there's nothing you can do about that. Right. But at least you tried, because in the end, that is what matters. And I had Brendan Byrne on the show, who was a victim of an abusive father. He's now an adult, and he stated that too, how important it is for the moms to fight back, because that really helps children heal as they, become adults and go into life and start their own family. And we don't want them to repeat it, right? Well, it gives them another way of acknowledging that it happened, and, them knowing, okay, this was what happened to me, and it's at least being acknowledged now. Because the abuser never acknowledges it. And then it's almost like, well, these terrible things are happening to you, but no, they're not, they're not happening. So even for adult children, that's really helpful. Yeah. And for them to see their mothers, fighting
and fighting and fighting and fighting. Although some, like you said, sometimes it is exhausting and it's terrifying. It is. I think going with your guts is really important. And I know personally for me, my guts won't let me stop. I just I feel it. It's like fire in my bones, I can't stop.
And I think that's the natural reaction. That is Mother Nature calling from within you, saying, you messed with my kid. Well, I'm coming back to
like
get
the grizzly
you now.
bear who somebody's messing with her cubs. You can't, it's so unnatural to not, you can't just lay there,
So what's the next step in battling the enemy, the family court enemy for you in this case?
I have filed a notice of appeal for what happened on August 1st. So I am writing my brief and filing that all next week. Then I'll, have all the steps.
Yeah, and the appeals
steps. Excuse me.
Let's talk about that appeals process for those protective mothers who are not familiar with that, because it's a lengthy process, isn't it?
It is. Yes. It is.
And it took me a while to figure out, all right, so then it goes to the appeals court and the case gets reviewed. And let's say the appeals court agrees with you. All that happens is that the case bounces back to family court, correct?
I know in some cases that can happen. I know there's also writ remedies where you don't even have to go to a hearing. I know in some cases there's mediation. I don't know specifically what's going to happen in my case yet. I haven't gotten a notice of mediation. Sometimes they'll say, well, it's not necessary to do a mediation. And, they do that a lot in trial court too. They'll try to set you up with a mediator and talk to you before. In my case, the mediator, I think his head was spinning. He didn't know, because my case was very difficult. And so, once you see all the evidence, and like I said before, I thought it would just play out. Okay, well, you explain everything. Here's this document. Here's the pictures. Here's this. Here's that. Oh, okay, I see what happened. Yeah, this was kind of hard to figure out, but now we're good to go. Here, their baby goes with mom. That's, like I said, I thought that would happen, but no, the mediator. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes the appellate court will review it and then it goes for a hearing. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in my case yet.
And you bring up a really good point about the mediation, because you would think that that's where the correct decisions are made.
Right.
And I think a lot, for protective mothers who are new to this, they need to realize that what the mediator decides is what the judge is going to go with.
Yes.
The mediator really has an incredibly important role. Too much have too much weight in it, as far as I'm concerned, because in effect they are doing the entire trial before it even goes to the judge. Mm-hmm. I remember after my daughter was taken from the Netherlands by her father to California, in a very brutal way, we went to mediation, and he started emailing the mediator all these false allegations. And here I am in the Netherlands. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, what I can and cannot do. Right. So he had already totally, talk about manipulation of court professionals. He had totally manipulated her into making her think that I was this crazy, dangerous child abductor, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, and I had no opportunity to offer any of the evidence because all my stuff was in Dutch, and it took 6 months to have it translated. And here I am having this mediator make the decision to have my daughter placed.
Based on who he says you are.
Yeah.
Which is abusive itself.
Right. And I think that is really important that mothers who are about to enter the system, who are in this type of situation, to realize that the mediation is that important and that it can be used against you that way, and just to be very, very prepared.
Yeah.
My first mediation session was in 2009. It was over the phone. I was in Austin, Texas, and they were in California, my ex and the mediator. And before I could even introduce myself with my name, the mediator said to me, if you don't bring your daughter to California for visitation, we're going to take her from you. All I said was, excuse me, I haven't even introduced myself.
You did say my daughter, right?
Right. How are you doing today? And is this mediation? You know?
Yeah.
I've actually taught mediation in college. Well, that's not mediation.
Helpful, yes. Oh my God.
So, and these individuals need to be held accountable too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I haven't really quite figured out how to hold them accountable. I don't know if these individuals can be sued. I'm not into suing everybody. Let's get that clear. I don't want to be in family court in the first place. I have nothing to do there. All I did was protect my child.
Yes.
I reported the abuse just like you, to the police, to CPS. So I followed all their steps, and I ended up losing my child. Even my attorney said, there's nothing you did wrong.
Yeah,
you followed all the steps.
Yep.
So where in the story are we making a mistake? I don't think I made any mistakes. I don't think you did either.
No, you did what was natural.
Yeah, and so did you. You had the legal document. Right. You were allowed to go to Oregon, and when it's convenient for the father, he rips up the agreement and goes to court and cries foul. Yep. It's like, excuse me?
Yeah.
You know? Well, I hope that you are going to become an attorney real quick because
fast as I can.
We need new Robin Yemens.
Yes.
And I'll share my screen here again so you can find her on YouTube and watch her and find her on Facebook. I have so much respect for this attorney because it takes real bravery to go out in public and demonstrate at a courthouse against the corruption that's going on. A lot of these attorneys that do this get retaliated against. Some lose their license. Some even get jailed. If you see here on the side of this video, attorney jailed, denied rights for exposing judicial corruption. Attorney Richard Fine, which is a 10-minute clip. I highly recommend watching that because that is about an attorney who blew the whistle and was arrested and jailed without due process, without a warrant, without nothing, without a trial, held in jail. And that's indeed a banana republic that we want to avoid by all costs. But that's what we're in. So we need protective mothers, become attorneys who have the bravery to face that system. Yeah. Brace yourself, get ready.
Oh yeah. I don't think there's anything else after what happened in August. I don't think there's anything else that nothing even phases you after that, you know?
Well, I think the thing that we can do is start networks of pro se groups where attorneys give advice in the background on how we can fight and teach us with webinars. And this is really what's needed. You know, if there are any paralegals out there, any attorneys who want to help pro se protective mothers in the United States, please contact me and I will set it up because there's many of us that are willing to fight, but we just need a little bit of help. So thank you for sharing this heartbreaking story with us today, Holly. I am happy that you have a lot of contact with your baby, that she's with you a lot of the time.
She is.
And I hope that if your ex finds this video and watches it, that he realizes that he needs to stop doing this, focus on your new family, dude, and leave Holly and the baby alone. She's not going to withhold contact if you behave like a normal human being, please.
Yeah.
That's what I hope for you, that this will develop in a positive direction, which is what I hope for all protective mothers. And you are contributing. You are contributing to that by sharing your story today. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'm very grateful.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story and for what you're doing for all of us. It's beautiful what you're doing.
Well, once your book is published, please come on the show again, and
I will,
and promote your book on the show, and give us an update on how things are going with you. And we'll keep following you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Karen.
All right. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
And thanks, everybody, for watching another episode of Hell's for Children. And I hope to see you all next week. Bye-bye.